All right, good evening, everyone. This is Tuesday, August 16th. This is the regular meeting of the Rhinebeck Central School District Board of Education. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the July 26, 2016 regular meeting?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second?
Okay. Is there any changes or adjustments to the minutes? Okay, all those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. There's an opportunity for public comment. However, there is no public present, so we'll move on. Item 4.1 is the consideration of the boys lacrosse merger. Mr. Boucher is here.
You're up.
As you know, those of you who were here when we started our lacrosse endeavor back in 2011. We started as a club team, moved to varsity the following year, and since that time, we had 2 years of very good numbers, and the numbers started to dwindle. Last year, we got to the point where the kids actually made the decision themselves. We started the year with 18 kids. By the time we got into games, we were running between 11 and 13 on the day of games. Our first game didn't go so well. After the first game, the kids met, they went to coach, and they had made the decision that they didn't want to play competitive games anymore. They wanted to continue to meet and practice, but they didn't feel it was best for them or for other teams to be playing against us at that point. So that was a very admirable thing of them to do. Since that time, we have been talking, myself, Joe, Ed, Jan Bonanza, who is our lacrosse coach, about the future of Rhinebeck lacrosse and what we can do to keep the program going. This spring at a league meeting, the idea was floated about schools that wanted to add modified lacrosse. And I was sitting next to the Pine Plains athletic director, and he raised his hand, and I looked at him, they don't have lacrosse. And I said, you're going to start modified? He said, yeah. And I said, we should talk. So we had a meeting, Joe, myself, Marty Handler, the superintendent from Pine Plains, and Rich Silverstein, the athletic director, and discussed the idea of a potential merger in the sport of boys lacrosse so as to increase our number. The other possibility that we're looking at, and we're leaning hard towards this, is to take a year and go from varsity to JV. Lacrosse is relatively new in Section 9. Back in 2011, there weren't very many JV teams. There are right now 12 JV teams, and within the last week, New Paltz added JV boys lacrosse as well, so they're now at 13. So we would have 14 teams that would be playing JV lacrosse, so 13 other schools that we would be able to play, so there would be competition there. If you look in the handout that I gave you, we have 11 kids that were on the team last year that this coming year we're looking at, they would be 10th graders, 4 10th graders, 3 11th graders, and 4 seniors. I've spoken with the Orange County Interscholastic Office because lacrosse is an Orange County sport, and they're not opposed to the idea of seniors being on JV. So, with the understanding that, we're not looking to win a championship on the JV level, we're looking to build our program, give our kids experience. We wouldn't have an impact player that would, dominate one position. We would make sure that, everybody was getting a positive experience here. If we can go to JV and we can get Pine Plains, kids can experience success, and then look to go back to varsity. The model has worked for a merger with Pine Plains for football, so we've got it in place already. It's just now they would be busing their kids here as opposed to us busing our kids there. At this point, the merging process is something that has changed on the section level, so we are a little behind the 8 ball. We would have to talk to the executive director, and I've already kind of placed that phone call on an informal level to let him know that we may need special circumstance to get a merger through. Pine Plains is going to talk to their Board of Education to see if this is something that they would be open to, and then also conduct a bit of a survey to see how many kids they would even be sending our way. The State lacrosse committee just approved new classification numbers. So even if we were at the varsity level, merging with Pine Plains, we would stay at the same classification, so we wouldn't be bumped up a classification. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We kind of wanted to, throw things your way just so you knew what was going on. See if you had any questions, comments, concerns.
If while they're mulling over your generous offer, we would do it the same way we're doing the football merger, only a mirror image of that. And currently for football, what we do is we provide our own transportation for our kids to Pine Plains for practices. We hire one of the coaches, they hire the other one. So if we were to flip-flop that and do it for lacrosse, we would host the program here, they would bus their kids over here for practices, and they would hire a coach, we would hire a coach. So for us, just like for them this past year for football, there would be no increased cost. It'd actually be a cost savings to us. Instead of having us hire two coaches, we'd only be hiring one, they'd be hiring the other. And that arrangement, which I thought was very generous of Pine Plains to offer that last year for football, I feel that if we're going to go down this road, if both boards are interested, if we can get the requisite approvals, there are a bunch of steps we have to take to make this a reality for the coming spring. But my recommendation would be we have a similar circumstance, and it's been football was very successful. So the Pine Plains board is meeting tomorrow night. So I think we would both like to be able to get back to one another and say, yeah, our board is positive about it. Ultimately, you'll have to vote to approve a merger like we have a formal vote for football. So we're not asking you to vote tonight, but we want to get a sense, is this something we should pursue, or is this something you're telling us, forget about it, you're dreaming, we'd never approve such a thing. And we're looking for the same thing from Pine Plains. Yeah, we're very interested, let's pursue it, let's take the requisite steps we need to take in order to formalize this, to get the approval of the section and set up a schedule and whatnot. So that's really what we're looking to find out from you tonight.
Just one minor correction. Actually, they hired the football coach. We did not hire him because we don't have a football coach in our contract.
Oh, okay.
So they hired them and then billed us for the cost of that one thing. So I think likewise, we'll be hiring both coaches and then billing them for the one coach because they don't have lacrosse.
Right, no,
I
they
don't
don't.
think
They don't, no.
Plus, we want them to be on the same level. We don't want one be paid at our rate and then one paid at their rate either. We'd like to have them both at the same rate.
Yeah, what has also, yes, thank you for, that's an important distinction. The lacrosse coaches, if you were interested and we went forward with this, they'd both be our employees.
Right.
Just like the football coaches are Pine Plains employees. However, they were very amenable last year to hiring one of our teachers. So Justin Randall they hired Justin Randall to be one of the football coaches. So it was great for us because we had one of our own staff members on their staff for football, and they have some ideas that there might be some people on their staff who have lacrosse background who they would suggest to us, hey, if you hired this individual, then they'd have a teacher presence on the coaching staff here. So it sounds encouraging. It sounds like, again, if both boards are on board, no pun intended, that the other pieces, it seems like the other pieces would be able to mesh pretty easily.
Laura?
So this is kind of exciting for our kids since it was dwindling. Can you tell me what you're looking for in terms of participation numbers? How many kids would make it a viable team?
I think that ideally we would like to be 20. 18 would work. The boys lacrosse is a very physical sport. So to start with a number that's low, you know you're going to have injuries, you know you're going to have kids that aren't going to be able to compete the entire season. So 18 would be good, a solid 18.
Who are showing up all the time,
Showing up all
yeah.
the time, and 20. The year, when we look at, we had 27 and 25, I mean, those kids were competitive. And we still had the injuries and kids didn't get, play every game, but, that was really where it needed to be.
And we were close to making sectionals that one year.
Yeah. And so if Pine Plains was looking at starting a modified team initially before he had spoken to you, had he already gotten some feedback from his kids that they wanted a team? Is that?
There had been some discussion amongst some of the student body. I don't think it was a mass like we had. When we started, we had a pretty strong group of kids that had been going out, throwing the ball around, learning that basic skill. I don't think it's there yet in Pine Plains.
That might be in a subsequent year, but likely not this coming year.
Diane?
How long do you think they would let us have a JV team with seniors on it? Because it seems like it's not too long, we're gonna have kids caught.
I don't think we would need to do the JV level for more than 2 years. I don't think. I think in all reality, 1 year would be good. When we were looking last year, so we're looking these numbers here, that would have meant, 7 kids were 9th and 10th graders last year trying to play against seniors. And that's a tough spot to be in. So I think that if we can get that group of kids up, we work with Northern Dutchess Youth Lacrosse. They use our facility here. They gave us a copy of where their kids were coming from. There are 8 kids that were definitely, it's by zip code, so there were 8 kids that were in what would be the Rhinebeck zip code that I can guarantee are in the Rhinebeck district. Now, whether or not they come through the program and stay with that program. 3 would have been in middle school last year. So, if we can get those 3 kids, and then if kids begin to experience success, then the program will be stronger.
Deirdre?
I just want to commend you for the ingenuity and kind of entrepreneurship that went into making this connection again with Pine Plains, and in this era of declining enrollments and the pressure on our sports program, it's really, really heartening to still allow this opportunity to our students and make those connections.
Thanks. That's one of the conversations we have all the time.
Yeah.
How are we going to keep opportunities for our kids
Right.
when the enrollments are dropping? If we don't do these things, and if the section isn't open to it,
Yeah.
then we're going to see sports.
I mean, as Steve mentioned, we'd already been having conversations about, like, what do we do next year? Because these numbers and our experience this past year were not good. And you could only see that spiraling downward, not upward. It's not like Northern Dutchess Lacrosse was telling us, yeah, we got 20 kids who are going to come into your program next year. So it was, not to take anything away from Steve, because he pursued it very vigorously, but it was serendipitous to an extent that we're sitting at meetings with these guys and they're talking about the same thing we're talking about. So, sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time to benefit our kids. And we did have a lot of success with football this past year. I mean, it was
Continuing this fall.
yeah, I mean, it was a fledgling program for them, and you'll recall we couldn't find a school with whom it made sense to partner, either given finances or travel distance or whatever, and they're almost next door to us, and it was like, yeah, your kids would help bolster our program, and like, oh great, well that gives our kids a place to play. So kind of the shoe's on the other foot now,
Yeah.
and we have a year's worth of very positive experience with our kids meshing with their kids, no issues, I mean it's it's gone, knock on wood, it's gone very smoothly, so this could work. It's got potential, I think, if you guys are supportive of it. Ultimately, it's up to both boards to say, yeah, let's give it a try, so.
So I'll just say, any opportunity that we have to continue the program for our students, potentially at a lower cost, I think it's a win all around, so I'm definitely in favor.
Yeah.
Anybody thinking we should not pursue this? I'll just ask the question a different
No,
A different way.
it's a good model because, if this works, we can,
It may serve us well
yeah.
in future years.
Right.
All right, great. Are you going to get in touch with Rich to tell him about our discussion?
I will speak with Rich again tomorrow.
Okay, good deal.
We're speaking every day. Football number was at 29 yesterday, they're at 30. That's not 30 Rhinebeck kids, but
Oh,
that's
okay.
30 total kids in the varsity program. And Rich was amazed. He's like, 2 years ago, this program was
Yeah.
almost dead. So I think they had, they were fighting to get 16, and now you got 30 kids out playing varsity
Yeah,
football.
that's great.
So that's great.
And they had success last year,
Yes, they
too?
did. Yeah, so.
It's great.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks, Steve. Appreciate you being here.
All right, so now Mr. Jensen is here to give us a presentation on the Smart Schools Bond Act preliminary investment plans.
Yeah, we'll do a
short
What stadium?
Do they play football?
Better
Pine
move.
Plains?
Yes, all the games were Pine Points, yeah.
Gotta get the
They
visuals.
don't have a stadium, but they have a field with a
Right, a
box.
couple bleachers.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an,
Really nice.
yeah. I mean, it's plenty adequate for,
Right,
it's no better or worse than what Red Hook's got.
right.
I mean, they don't have a stadium, they just have a field with bleachers and a
Right.
press box, and it works.
That's all we had.
Yeah, yeah, nothing wrong with that.
To your thing?
I don't think we had the press box. Cool. No, we just had my uncle up taking 8mm pictures of us, like the movies of us on.
Well,
See if I
Dr.
can find
Handler
those.
does the play-by-play for the football games.
Oh, that's funny.
I told him if he wants, I'll go over and do color commentary.
You should.
That would probably be pretty fun.
I'd get myself in trouble.
Okay, tonight I wanted to bring you up to speed on the Smart Schools Investment Plan, or the Smart Schools Bond Act. Back in 2014, the voters of New York State voted to approve a $2 billion technology bond that was statewide. And then the state spent several months really deciding how to divvy up that money and allocate that to different schools based upon the population, based upon economic need, all of those kinds of things. And came up with a plan on how districts go about spending that money, and the oversight on that is pretty intense. One of the things that they wanted everyone to do was to form a committee, and we had a committee, and I won't divulge the names right now only because I'll probably forget somebody, but we had a cross-section of teachers, administrators, parents, and students that came together, I think 3 different times, and discussed the bond, discussed the needs of the district. We did a needs assessment, and came up with a plan. And right now what you're going to see is phase 1 of that. One of the things about the Smart Bond is that you don't have to submit everything all at once. Rhinebeck's allocation was around $277,000. Some districts, I know some districts that got $13 million. So you're not going to do that all at once. And there is no time limit on any of this. So if we wanted to do this in 5 phases, we could do that. We can do it in 2, we can do it in 1. We can do it over 5 years, we can do it over 10 years. It doesn't matter. They have none of those constraints are there. So, so school districts have been looking at this, and they know that it's a one-shot deal, and they're looking at long-term investments. They don't want to look at the short term and try to buy a bunch of toys, so to speak, and that break in 2 years, because there's no replacement plan for that. So we're looking at long-term investments. So the categories, there were 6 categories that the state identified that they would fund under this bond. One was high-speed broadband wireless connectivities for schools and communities, meaning that was all the infrastructure behind the scenes, servers, switches, those kinds of things, and increasing your bandwidth to the school district. Learning technology for the classroom was the second one. Third one was community connectivity, which meant that if you wanted to create areas within the community, hotspots, so to speak, that's an example of where you would increase that, maybe at a local library, those kinds of things. Educational facilities for pre-kindergarten and replace classroom trailers, and high-tech security features. Now, what we saw was there were 3 of these that really did not apply to us due to the uniqueness of Rhinebeck, and those were items 3, 4, and 5. We're a very broad, you know, we travel, we have a lot of miles across our district, you know, depending on how the roads go. So we're pretty spread out. We're not centralized like in an urban setting. We don't have pre-kindergarten facility issues here because we don't have to do pre-kindergarten, and we don't have classroom trailers. So 3 of those categories already were somewhat out of the park, either for logistical reasons or they simply didn't apply. But items 1, 2, and 6 we began to look at. And so I want to talk to you about those items. We took items 1, 2, and 6, school connectivity, classroom technology, and high-tech security, and we broke it up in this manner. We knew we had $277,000. I knew from what we had to do logistically on this end, as far as the infrastructure, these were deferred maintenance issues, things that need to be done. We're fortunate because we did not have to spend it on our network because we just did that. We only did that like 2 or 3 years ago. We built a Wi-Fi system. Our switches are up to date. We're in very good shape that way, but we are lacking in some other areas, and I'll get into that. The total cost of that ended up being $139,000. So I presented that to the committee, and I said, this is the knowns that I have. And so the committee looked at that. I explained each of the items of what we were doing and why we were doing it, and I'll get into that later on, which left a balance. And what they felt, the committee felt, was we should put $20,000 into high-tech security. It's a broad category. It could be hardening of doors, it could be cameras, it could be a way of signing in visitors, a myriad of things that could be done with that. And there was a real sense that security needed to be addressed among some of the committee members, which left, if we did that, if we took the 139 and the 20, that left us a balance in the classroom of about $118,000. One of the things that I put this graphic up here because professional development, support, and maintenance are not supported by this tech bond, so you cannot bring in professional development. I think it's going to be very difficult, particularly for some larger school districts. Take, for instance, the district I cited that got $13 million. I don't know how you infuse $13 million of technology into a business, an industry, a school district, or whatever, without any professional development. But so those districts have a real challenge ahead of them in doing that. But that is one area where you have to do it through district budgets and grants. So that's not supported by the Smart Bond initiative. So what we have is tonight, what I'm presenting is only the school connectivity part. The classroom technology, the buildings and the teachers involved in this committee have not decided on where they want to go with that money just yet. Same thing with the security. What the committee decided was the high-tech security issue should go to the safety committee of the district. Let them decide where the needs are, but provide the funding to do that. So there was a real sense of deferring to those who are involved in those areas. And primarily the classroom technology, we were looking at the high school because the elementary and the middle school have gotten some infusion of technology over the last couple of years. The high school has not. And so we began to look at that. So Ed Davenport and myself are going to be working together with the committee this fall, starting up. We tried to do some things last spring, but due to logistics, we couldn't get, they were wanting to go out to visit some other schools and do a little bit of research, see what's out there, what's being done. We had a appointment set up with Red Hook and with Pine Plains that due to a myriad of logistics, we couldn't get out there and see them, but we want to do that this fall and in some other places as well. They want to see what's going on in the area of classroom technology and classroom presentation technology. So tonight, what we're going to be doing is talking about just the school connectivity part, and these two we set aside for a different phase. Whether we combine them or I come back to you doing another presentation to technology and another one for security, I'll do that. But it depends on how fast we can do this. So,
And that's really not a big deal to chunk it out like
Nope.
this. And there's no clock running on when we have to
very
spend
normal
this
to do
money.
it this way, yes. So the school connectivity, I just want to explain to you what basically, I'm giving you the 35,000 foot view because that's the purpose of this presentation. One of the things that the Smart Bond requires is that we come to the board and give this to the public, present this, put it on our website, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, for 30 days for public input and response. And then after that, come back to you again with a resolution saying thumbs up, thumbs down, modify, whatever it is that we, depending on what the public says and what the wishes of this board. You are the final decision makers in this process. So anyways, I want to get into what we're spending this $139,000 on. We have a district office server. Now that supports a lot of the student information system, transportation, it does payroll, it does some things on the back end. It also supports some issues with students. But we have a server here that is not, it's coming to the end of life. And it's behind in the network, it's very well protected, but it's an old server and it's very antiquated. And it's out of service or coming out to be at the end of its life. And we need to replace that. And that's something that CSI and the BOCES has both identified to us as being a critical piece that needs to be replaced. Replace the domain controllers. These are electronic devices that we have. We have 3 of them. They're basically devices that, lack of a better term, the traffic cop or the gatekeeper, so to speak, whenever you log on, it authenticates and says, oh, you're Steve Jensen, or you're Joe Phelan, or you're whomever, and authenticates you and make sure you're the legitimate person and all those kinds of things. Those are as old as the district server. The ASA appliance is the appliance that basically has the district communicate to the internet. And right now, its maximum speed is 100 megs, which is not very fast when you think of the size of our district or the number of users that we have. Matter of fact, I know that Tom and I have been bumping up over the last 2 years the internet speed. The problem is, even if we wanted to bump it up anymore, our appliance isn't going to allow us. We've hit a wall. And so we need to upgrade that. That is about, and I don't remember the cost of these right off the bat, but this was about $20,000, $139,000. So, and that makes these approximately $19,000, these 2 items. Because the dark fiber, and I want to speak a little bit about this because it's a little unique. I don't think many school districts are going to be applying for this. But dark fiber between the main campus and the elementary school. Right now, what we have, and I'll just give you a little short synopsis. If you think of all of our connectivity being on a ring, so all 13 Dutchess County schools are on a ring. And we all go out to the internet and we do what we need to do. What we have to do, because the way that it's set up and the economics of it really worked out. I argued it one time until they explained it to me, sat me down and said, this is why it's set up the way that it is. So if you have this ring, and all 13 school districts are going out, Rhinebeck has a segment of that ring, which is called a point-to-point. So it goes directly from CLS to the high school. So if I'm typing an email to somebody outside of the district, I go from my office in CLS, I go out on this segment of the ring, and then I come into the high school, and then I go out from there, and it gets sent to the recipient of whomever I'm sending it to. And that's how all traffic at CLS is working. It all runs on this little segment. That little segment costs us about $11,000 a year to run. And it's throttled at 100 megs as well. Now, if Joe is trying to save a file from his office, which is at the high school, to the server, he gets a gig. So it just goes right there. It's fast. If I try to save the same file from my office, it's got to chunk across this 100 meg pipe that's very slow and it's very throttled down. So I was trying to solve this problem. I've been working on this for a couple of years now. So I called Light Tower, called Frontier, called a couple of companies and said, would you sell us dark fiber? Because fiber is fiber. It's just glass strands, and whatever's on it travels at the speed of light, and the only thing that changes are the electronics on the ends. So I could have 100 meg dark fiber, or I could have 100 gigs dark fiber, depending on what the abilities of the electronics are on the end. The fiber doesn't change. It remains the same. about 20 years ago, I put a piece of fiber in the Troy City School District, and they still use it on their main campus. They just keep upgrading the electronics on the ends. Fiber is fiber is fiber. So I looked at that, and there is a private company out there that I did contract with, or not contract, I contacted them, and I talked to them about doing this, and they came out and they did a field study, and they proposed a dark fiber coming from the main campus down North Park, across our net, down Knollwood, about 22 poles along the way, and that was about $85,000 to do that. Now, the other $15,000 is for the initial cost of working with the utility company who owns the poles. You have to get an easement from them, and they charge so much per pole, and then, you know, to do the engineering part and all of those kinds of things. The company would come down and then string the poles. Then we would be basically paying a yearly fee of about, after that's all done, that's about 15 grand in all of that I've just described. So that brings it up to 100. After that, we just pay $1,000 a year approximately. And I'm rounding these numbers. I can give you the specifics of it. So we've gone from paying $11,000 a year to $1,000 a year. So what the district will realize is a $10,000 savings approximately every year going forward. So yeah, it might take 10 years for this to pay for itself, but really, it's not, you know, it's coming from the bond. So we're going to realize a $10,000 or approximately that as a savings if we're able to successfully do this piece of the project. So that probably will get the most scrutiny, but I think it's also the one that benefits us the best, because I think it's something that we need to do. The other thing that it does is Michelle, who runs our network, she basically has to run 2 zones in that network. She runs main campus, and then everything that she does configuring, she's got to do that twice because she's got this other area, this other zone on her network. Now it'd be all, the difference between my office and Joe's office will be nothing. It will all appear to be one network, as if my office was right next to Joe's. It doesn't matter. The physical location doesn't matter, because again, the data's traveling at the speed of light across this thing as fast as we want to have it. Now the company will also, and it's a large company, Adirondack Cable. They're out of Albany. This is the one that I just approached. A tree falls on breaks the wire, breaks the cable, car hits a pole, those kinds of things. They come down and we pay a per call service to do that. Now, I don't know how many times, I did a little quick scan of, the poles and the trees, and our net. Not a lot of trees, we probably be more in danger of ice than probably anything else. But, there's not a lot there, and it's a low speed areas. It's not like, cars are going 70 miles, not down our net, those kinds of things. But anyways, I think it's a fairly safe thing to say that would probably be okay for the most part with that scenario. So that is really what the school connectivity part is. Again, taking care of some obsolete equipment here, increasing our speed, and taking care of making our district one network rather than 2 separate ones with this little segment that we pay $11,000 a year to do. And I'd really like to get out from under that, because if we want more speed across that, then we got to come up with more money. So the speed demands are just going to outpace the money and our ability to be able to pay for that. So that is really what the school connectivity part is. Here's the process as laid out by the state. District prepares a preliminary plan, which is what I just showed you on that one segment, phase 1. And we look for a presentation to the board for approval. That's today's date. Then we post our plan for 30 days. And I'll just probably talk about the connectivity part. I won't get into the classroom technology or the high-tech security part. I'm just talking about phase 1. And there, public notice and public hearing, we schedule that after, and we wait for obviously during this time, we can do it by email, by phone, or they can come to a meeting. Doesn't really matter. Then we prepare a plan, and that's done through a website. And just like Joe approves the technology plan, and I tell him we've done that, they have a plan that is submitted, or we prepare it. You make a final approval of that plan after we review it, and then we electronically submit it to the state, and the state then looks at it, approves it, comes back and says, hey, can you explain this? And we go through that process. And we do the same for the other 2 components. And that really is the process. that we go through. So it gives really an opportunity for the public to have an input, and we'll put it on our website, and we'll be able to present it for 30 days, and then we hold a public hearing, and usually most people will do, because you don't have to do this necessarily, you can do this in, all three of these things can be done at one time. You could have the plan, review the plan, approve, have your public hearing, and then approve it that same night. So those three pieces could all happen together, and then we just submit to the state. And that is really, essentially, the process. And so, I don't know if you have any questions. You know, if I don't have the answer now, I'll get them for you, but if you...
I think it was a great presentation. I think really commend you and the committee for coming up with some really good ideas. I know there's been a lot of issues with the connectivity between CLS and here, just based on our conversations in the last couple of years. So if that problem can go away, I think that's awesome. And I'm one poll past, if you can just... I appreciate it. What's the process after the state approves it? Do they give us the money? Do we have to submit reimbursement?
We front it and submit for reimbursement. Today, let's say our server died, and this is the unfortunate part. If our district office server died tomorrow,
just jinx.
And I know, really. And we had to pay it. It wouldn't qualify because it was done prior to being approved. So that's why I thought about submitting this all at once and waiting for these other committees. I said, I don't want to wait. I just want to get the ball rolling as quickly as possible and get this infrastructure straightened out as best we can. Because anything we spend prior to that they'll just nix it.
And it's funded back the same year, same budget, or?
Yeah, I think there's I don't know if it's in the same budget cycle, but I think they do within 90 days of submitting it. So if you're crossing over, you know, then it would.
If you submit it in May, then you're not going to get it till the next budget cycle.
I think it's 90 days. Don't hold me to that, but I'll look it up. But I think they tried to get back to you within 3 months.
Yeah, well, the first thing is they have to approve it
Sure.
first,
Correct.
too. And they've gone through 3 rounds now, I think it is.
3 or 4. They're getting faster. I've noticed that.
I have
started
that
to do
because it was I mean, it's a long process, as you see, but some school districts started submitting last spring.
Yes.
Maybe about 40 in each cycle have been approved, but no big projects whatsoever. Just, it seems like a lot of smaller stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people are gearing up. If they have capital projects, they're trying to, because you can weave it in with a capital project. So you can do that, but it's very difficult to do. You know, it's hard to navigate those waters, but we don't have that issue here.
And I know there's one school district in this county who's saying, how am I gonna pay for this?
Yeah,
Because they don't have the money to
Yeah.
fund it up, so they gotta do it in small chunks.
right.
This is all I have available, do that, get reimbursed, go for the next phase.
I've had one school wondering whether they have to borrow money to front it, and then they're not going to get their full amount because they're paying interest, you know, because they have to front it ahead of time. So, you know, so that's an issue for some districts.
So the review process for the state, I think it's been going between 3 and 4 months, right? While they are sitting with your plan and
Yes,
doing.
probably. Yes,
Okay,
so I wouldn't expect. Yeah, I'd expect a 3 or 4 month approval cycle.
Okay,
for
so
that.
once we have our 30-day, you know, time for the public to comment and all that, we probably wouldn't see any approval before 5 or 6
No,
months.
but what I'm hoping
now
is that I can actually, in a sense, leapfrog all the phases. In other words, I'll get the other phases going while we're waiting for approval on phase 1, because they're all separate, in the eyes of the state, they're separate projects. And so we can go ahead and still do our high-tech security, do our classroom technology, and get those in the queue as well while we're waiting for a response from the state.
But I'm just thinking
Yep.
about the timeline, if we get approved by February, say, and everything's fine, then probably by the end of this school year, we're getting the work done, right?
Yeah, exactly. And CSI, they're the ones who scoped out most of that work. The projects have been scoped out. They already know what they need. They've got the recommendations within the estimates that they provided for us, and they're working with us. Because they've been with us for so long, they have all the engineering already done. So, but that was the areas that they picked up on, particularly the ones that I just cited. So.
Then the question will come with CSI, depending on how many other school districts have gotten successful.
Yeah.
Whether they'll have
The manpower, the
time,
willpower,
schedule
yeah,
to get it in there.
yeah.
Because
And you have to also
there
schedule
could
with
be
your vendor.
multiple school districts in Dutchess County who get approved at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what pecking order they'll go in, but.
Right, right, exactly, so, yes.
So if we do the preliminary approval tonight, that will be the beginning of the 30-day period for public input?
Once we post it on the website, we'll
Once-
start the
okay,
clock.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask
Yeah.
the method for
Yeah,
collecting that.
I'll probably talk to Ed tomorrow, and work off the graphics and probably over the next few days.
Yeah.
Great.
You know, if we don't get it this week, it'll be Monday or something like that,
Right,
and we'll
right.
get that out there, but we wanna get that process going as quick as possible.
So I know we're talking about the connectivity part first, in the first phase. You mentioned that there's a $20,000 figure for high-tech security.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a wish list of items for that, or where did that $20,000 come from?
That was, in discussion, we were talking about it, and some people have they had done some research and came up with a kind of a percentage and said, this is what you should be spending on security, and on some of the literature that they read, you know, that you should be spending that much towards safeguarding. For instance, our server sit behind a wooden door. You know, that probably should be a hardened steel door, you know, for security purposes, so that can't be broken into and things. So it's things like that. You know, was there a specific formula? No, it was really intuition. And if they come up with less than that, then we would simply transfer that. Yeah,
We're talking about security for the equipment or for the school in general?
It's for it can apply to the school in general. You can do, let's say, security cameras that aren't facing or, you know, towards the server closet. It could be on one of the wings and things like that.
Now, if you
Yep.
wanted to put metal detectors at the doorway to all of our schools, you could probably spend a chunk of that money for that, if that was what we.
They talked about door hardening, window hardening in classrooms. I think a lot of that was in response to some of the acts that we've seen across the country. And so it was surprisingly broad to me, and I can share that with you through an email or, you know, with the board, what the category, what items there were that do qualify. And there is a site that I'll also send you with at the state ed website. It has the FAQs and what applies, what doesn't apply, you know. I saw some presentations as I was preparing for this one. Some were very short and succinct like mine, and others were, I mean, they were 30 slides long, going through item by item by item, and I'm like, you know, but it was really meant, this is really meant to be the 35,000 foot view, so the public can digest it and say, okay, yeah, I can see where you're going with this.
I think it's safe to say that phase one is the more fully baked of the
Yes,
three phases.
absolutely.
It's pretty much ready to go once the 30-day period is up and the board votes to approve the final plan. I think the other ones are in the process of
Yeah.
being baked, and there have been discussions, there's been input from the building safety teams into the Smart Bond Committee, but I don't think anybody has said, yeah, this is exactly what it'll look like. Same with the classroom technology.
Correct.
There's an amount of money, a target amount of money, and they're still having discussions about what technology would we want to spend that money on. So they're not ready for prime time yet.
And-
This piece is, we figured we ought to get going with this piece.
And just as another scenario, the classroom technology, it may be decided by that committee at that time to say, well, we're going to break this out over several years. You know, so that could be broken down into subcomponents. So it's very fluid on those two sides. The easiest one to do was really the infrastructure, because I just did an assessment preparing for the audit and said, this is our strengths, these are our weaknesses, here they are, and it was pretty black and white.
So I just want to follow up on that one point about the $20,000 for the high-tech security, or I mean, whatever the amount
Yep.
is, yeah. Just to think about that in relationship to the building condition survey and the
Yep.
kinds of things we're talking about in that group with
That's right.
facilities, and I'm sure there's cross-membership
Yes.
through safety, but
Yeah.
obviously
And-
there
and-
could be implications for
And to
that.
the credit of the committee, they felt we're not the ones really
Yeah.
attuned to all of
Yeah,
those
yeah.
things. It should be really the committee, you're speaking of,
Yeah.
the safety committee.
Right.
They're the ones who've had their pulse on those issues. And so I commend them for deferring to
Yeah.
that process, because it's easy to, well, I've got all this money, I'm gonna spend it here, and, you know.
Yeah.
No, they were pretty good about it. They said, no, what we need to do is defer that. to another body. And I have to make sure that that body is represented in this process, you know, but we got to make sure that that representation is there. But once we do that, we should be fine. So.
Before you, once all the questions are done,
Sure.
before you take your leave and drive north to Troy, I just want to bring the board's attention to action item 6.5, and I want to make sure that you don't have any questions prior to voting for that, because if we let Steve go, we won't get to that for another 3-4 hours, and you know, he'll be home tucked in bed by the time you have a question. Just kidding about the 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So.
All right, so are there any questions or anything else that need to be addressed?
All right, thank you very much.
Well done, Steve, thank you very much,
Appreciate it.
yeah.
No, that's all right.
Okay, so we'll move on to the 2016-17 board goal development update.
Okay, again, not an awful lot to say. Mark did email you and me today a compendium of the ideas that he's received to date. We still have another little less than 2 weeks before we meet. We're meeting on Monday, the 29th at 4 p.m. So obviously, if people have other ideas, please continue to forward them to Mark, and then we'll sit down, and that's what we'll be spending several hours doing, is going through the ideas that are on the table and decide what direction we're going to take with those goals. I also placed in your packets a hard copy of the goals from, I think, 2002, 2003. Steve had asked to see them, maybe not that many years, but I had them all, so I gave you everything that I had from when I started keeping copies of that back in 2002, 2003. So you've got the whole landscape there since recorded time for those things anyway. So again, not much more to say. It's just we're on the way in the process, and it'd be nice to get ideas from everybody before that Monday afternoon.
Okay,
That's all I have.
is there further discussion?
Keep them coming.
All right, so just keep your ideas coming, those who haven't submitted any. I have to do mine yet, so I'm as guilty as other people, so.
This time.
All right, so we'll move on to board committee reports. School start time?
Okay, so the school start time committee met July 28th, and it's going to be a very busy period of communicating going on really from, the beginning of August through the start of school. We're mindful that this was discussed a while ago, it was acted on a while ago, so we want to be sure nobody's surprised when school starts and there's this shift of 30 minutes later start time. We did go over a plan of action in terms of all the places and methods we want to use for communicating with the community, including, paper communications, mailings, electronic communications, using the automatic phone call feature that seems to work well for notifying people on short notice of important news. Asking our athletic director to work with the coaches to spread the word through the tryout process and the kind of preseason period of time in the summer. Using Superintendent's Conference Day to talk about the message of wellness and sleep wellness with all our faculty and staff. Student assemblies, the district website, Twitter, social media in general. So we hope that no one can say that they hadn't heard that this was going to be happening. At the same time, we view this change, obviously we're communicating around a point of fact, which is the change, and giving the schedule very clearly to families, but we also want to use this as an opportunity to engage families with questions around health and wellness, and it was something that was particularly striking to us in the committee when we met with student support professionals in all the buildings around the kinds of concerns they see families struggling with and students struggling with, whether that's increased anxiety, sense of sleepiness, people needing to come in and sleep in the nurse's office, people not really eating breakfast because they're too tired in the morning. There's a whole host of sort of symptoms, you might say, that we want to try to address through this particular pilot year and looking at how effective it is in terms of helping us to engage our families and students around sleep. I'll just address the public out there that we're very much looking forward to working with families and all members of the district in sort of a good faith effort to try this. We recognize that it does represent a shift in our patterns and our daily lives, and we're really committed to studying what the impact is. So we really need to get feedback from everyone as we move forward. We will share, for instance, what we've learned from the pediatric daytime sleepiness survey, which was administered at the end of the school year. And there will be information posted about that instrument, what some of the research is behind how it's been used to study sleep patterns. And it's, I think, very heartening to hear that Tom has already been working with everyone in the bus company around the new schedules.
I was doing that already.
Doing the runs, making sure everything is going to work with clock-like precision. We hope also, as soon as we get going with the school year, of course, to ask people to use all methods at their disposal for contacting us and communicating with us around how it's going in their homes, the new start time. We're also going to reach out to the student support team very early on to try and get some feedback right away about what they're seeing in the classrooms, the hallways, how the passing time is going, and in general how people are settling into the new school year. So there's a lot to do, but I think we're actually well on our way, and you have a draft of a newsletter that we would like to send out within the next week, right? Mm-hmm. Thanks to Laura's beautiful work. So if you guys have input on that communication, we would appreciate it.
All right, any questions?
I just would also like to add that at least the back of this newsletter, which has sort of the bulleted bell schedule for the middle and high school and the new times at Chancellor, will be available at Walk Your Schedule nights, just as another way of trying to get it into people's heads that the time is not what they have traditionally used.
I've already, since our email earlier today, I contacted the building principals. I already know how many copies they need. And yeah, they're more than happy to use that as another form for distributing this information.
We're knocking off a second in between classroom time for parent night too, so they get used to the
Yeah, they should, yes.
That's right. No more cookies in the home.
We're gonna hustle.
All right, anything else for the school start time committee? All right, with that, we'll move on to facilities. Lisa is not here, so I will present the minutes. So the committee talked about the anticipated capital project. An RFP has gone out for a construction manager, which the responses are due on Thursday. Several inquiries have been made about the construction management work. Garrett Hamlin, who was with us from Tetra Tech Architects, recommends that we have a construction manager in place because of they can help with estimating costs, and they can also help once the construction starts with scheduling of various parts of the project so that things move along more efficiently. So Garrett had presented us with a pre-referendum building survey, which you have in the packet, which is these are items that were called out on the building condition survey, and some of them have been on our lists for quite a while. But these are items we're looking at. We're hoping to engage a community committee that can look these items over and tell us, maybe help us prioritize them a little bit better, what items they feel are more important or less important, and we can try to mold the project based on their input. So the architect will assist in creating a budget once we've been through that process. And we're trying to stick to the timeline to have a referendum vote on December 6th. We're going to try to engage the committee during the month of September and develop the scope so that we can meet various kind of legal requirements for the seeker resolution and board resolution in October, so that we can then publish information about the project and the voting process on time, so that we can have a vote on December 6th. Are there any questions? Laura?
I got a whole bunch.
Okay.
My first is wondering when we're going to do the building walkthrough with Sheldon, which we do every year.
We usually do that at our second board meeting of September, at 6 or 6:30, I think, 6:30.
It would be really helpful to me if he could sort of point to and highlight some of these bigger items on this list, so that, I'm not really sure what a curtain necessarily is, because we don't have curtains.
It's not a curtain that you're thinking of.
Oh, exactly. So if he could sort of
The
walk
curtain
wthrough
wall.
what some
Such a
of
good
these
idea.
items
Yes.
look like and feel like, that would be really helpful. And other question. Oh yeah, the altered format for this, is that going to be given after the advisory committee has taken a shot at it, or are they going to?
No, we talked about getting that sort of in a prioritized format before we actually meet with the, before we form the committee, just because we think it'll be easier to kind of identify items if they're in sort of an order that we've already preliminarily prioritized, if that makes sense. Because we know some of the items are must-haves, where others may not be, so we want to make sure we stress that those are must-have items right at the top of the list, when we meet with the community.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful for those of us who aren't on the committee also.
Yeah, and because we're not starting with a blank slate, we're spinning off the building condition survey work that's already been done, so we don't want to get a bunch of people together and put them in a room and say, so let's pie in the sky wish list what you'd like to see. No, we know we have things that have been already called out by the architects in the building condition survey, which is a required document. So we've done a lot of, de facto, we've done a lot of the legwork, and we're, a lot of, if I said it once, I'll say it a dozen more times before the beginning of December, but there is nothing really sexy in this project. A lot of it, when you were saying, if Sheldon can show us the stuff, I'd say 3/4 of this stuff you won't even see, unless you're going to climb up on a roof or something. No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Most of it's like, in a ceiling, in a base, in a boiler room. Places where members of the public or even employees in the school district are not going to see this stuff. Not all of it, but a lot of it. We could certainly point it out to you, and the stuff that is seeable, like the curtain wall at Chancellor. You've seen these big window walls by the cafeteria in the front, across the front and the back. Those are all curtain walls. So yeah, you can see them, and when we walk around, Sheldon can show you where there are issues. It's not safety issues, because we've had them checked out numerous times over the years to make sure it's not a safety issue, but it may be an issue in terms of air infiltration. The windows over here, for example, we know that when we replaced them a number of years ago with the, what was that? I'm thinking Smart Bond money. I can't get that out of my head now.
Excel.
The Excel money, I mean, we saw a huge positive difference in terms of comfort as well as energy savings. But, you know, to just look at them, you don't, it doesn't have the same kind of impact as you would if we're walking around and saying, yeah, here's where the new 4 classroom addition is gonna go. I mean, there's little, if any, of that kind of stuff in this project, but we'll point that out to you. But we're certainly not gonna be starting at scratch with members of a community committee. On that topic, I don't want to let this report go by without asking you to please send me, the facilities committee, the names of some community people whom you think might be interested in donating their time for 2, maybe 3 meetings at most in the early fall to go over what we put together here and give us some feedback, especially relative to the question, well, how big should this project be? You know, we've been looking at potential models that could go anywhere from 5 million to 15 million. Well, we need some feedback from community members as to what would the community support in terms of the dollars for what they would be getting, and to give us that kind of feedback. So we need people, and if you know of folks, you know, I mean, you're not committing them, you're just giving us some names, and then we'll reach out to them via letter or email or whatever, inviting them to participate in this community committee. But unlike the $24 million project we did about 10 years ago, that committee process took months. This one, given the size of it and the legwork that's already been done, is not going to be a 6-month or a 9-month commitment. It's going to be, we're thinking maybe 2 or 3 meetings, if that many. So if you're talking to people, you don't have to worry about scaring them off. So, you have a couple, 3 meetings to spare during the month of September. If so, we could really use some people to give us some feedback on this project. So please send those to me as soon as you have them, because as soon as we get them, we want to move forward with that.
And just as a final note, when we were talking about this in the facilities committee, we were talking about as many as 30 people could be invited to write. Was that the number you came up, 20 to 30?
I mean, there's no magic number, but we'd like.
So it's not like 3, it's not like we just need 3 community members.
Right.
We need a broad representative, right, sample of people who could be helpful in thinking through these.
I mean, if we had between 20 and 30 people, I think that'd be a good number.
Can I ask, would it be appropriate maybe to reach out to Rick and see who he might recommend of
That's a
the
really
elder
good idea.
population?
Rick Walker, yeah, that's a great idea.
That's a really good idea. Was that your idea too?
He's got his finger on that community.
That's really smart.
Yeah, great idea.
Diane, was that your thought, or?
It was my thought, but I
Okay.
have another one. Are you gonna put it on the website, just asking, or send an email out just to our
We'll-
community, just to,
We'll come up with we'll send, we'll do whatever we can. We'll send, I did ask our friend Bill Kemble to join us this evening, but, I mean, in fairness, he was probably already committed to something else. I'm not criticizing him. But, I'd like to reach out to him again, and I said to him, left him a message, if you're not able to make it to the meeting, let's talk soon so I can kind of bring you up to speed. So that would be another way to get the word out that, the district is looking to put together a committee, contact me or my office, and a website, sure, that's no cost there. That's a no-brainer, so,
Anything else? Facilities? Okay. There's no other committee reports, correct?
Nope.
All right, move on to good news. Good news.
Well, while we're all busy watching Olympics, it's great to see the actual athletes in our town coming out and
They're
trying out for
back.
their sports
They're
and
back.
getting involved in this hot weather. And our coaches are out there working with these young people. So I think that's very good news to see them getting going already.
All right, other good news?
Well, I for one was happy to see us make Newsweek's list of, the top 500 high schools nationally. Again, at the risk of putting too much stock in those kinds of lists and rankings and ratings, I'd rather be on the list than not on the list. So, I try to avoid the discussion about our ranking relative to a neighboring school districts, because I think statistically those numbers are pretty darn close. But having 2 school districts in northern Dutchess County out of all the school districts in Dutchess County is, I'll take that one too.
All right, other good news? All right, move on to old business. Any items of old business?
I think so.
Okay. Public comment? There's
I
now
don't think
no
so.
audience. Move on to other.
I don't have any other.
Okay, no other. We'll move on to our action items. Just gonna call everybody's attention to items 6.3 and 6.4. I'm gonna ask Mary Ann to do a roll call vote on those. We're required by the law to do that, so I'll let you do that when the time comes. You just have to go around the room and call the names and they'll vote aye or nay. All right, so item 6.1, may I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve 2015-16 budget transfers in accordance with Board of Education policy number 6150 for the school year ending June 30th, 2016.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve additional emergency conditional substitute instructional and non-instructional staff for the 2016-17 school year?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. Okay, item 6.3, may I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to adopt the resolution to confirm tax rolls and authorize the tax levy for the 2016-17 school year?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Diane Myers.
Yay.
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 Mark Weishaw.
Yay.
Deidre Zimmer.
Yay.
Okay, that's unanimous, that motion passes. And we have a document that has to be signed after the meeting. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to issue the tax warrant to the school tax collector to collect taxes in the total sum of $26,869,359, exclusive of star reimbursements. The tax collector is not responsible for the collection of that portion of the warrant. The collection period begins September 1st, 2016 and ends on October 31st, 2016. The original warrant will be brought to the meeting to be signed by the board. And I have it here.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Joe?
Yeah, before the board votes, Tom, would you just give the board the quick and dirty layman's version of what's unusual about this year's?
Very unusual one. We actually have, our tax rates are going down, actually.
Wow.
So this is probably the first time this has probably ever happened, okay? Now, what's caused this? All right, first of all, we did have a small 1.26% tax levy increase, okay? So it was small to begin with.
Because of the cap.
Because of the cap, right. But what really changed this year, and the information is here in your packet, it's really the change to the assessments. So our overall value of the school district went up 1.43% on the assessment basis. On a full value, it's actually even higher. And that is because there's also equalization rates. the equalization rates for Hyde Park and Stanford, they went down, which means the value of the property went up. They are going to see over a 6% increase in their taxes, but it's all due to equalization rates. While everybody else outside of Clinton, or not Clinton, sorry, Hyde Park and Stanford are going to have a negative 0.41% decrease in the tax rate. Not the tax levy, the tax rate. So if you do hear something from somebody, Stanford and Hyde Park, the reason they're not enjoying the negative tax rate is because they're not on 100% equalization. So every once in a while, the state will come in, and every year they change that equalization rate. It's usually minute. This time it was a big one. I mean, over 6%. So the value of their homes all went up 6%. Everybody else stayed the same as far as their assessment. So that's the big thing here. So there is going to be a small segment of the population that's going to go, oh, I can't believe this. I mean, my taxes went up over 6%. But that's a few minority. I mean, that's only about 5% of the entire population of the district. But they are going to see a positive increase. Everybody else is going to see a negative, 0.41. So that's really good. In the old days, if this was to happen, we'd go to zero and we reduce our appropriated fund balance. But we can't do that anymore.
Right.
It's not, because now it's the tax levy. Even though we're voting on the amount, and when we vote, and that third Tuesday in May, you are voting for the amount of money in the budget, but also you're locked into a tax levy. You're locked into it. You can't change it. Before the tax cap, we could have sat here and made changes and say, oh, we really think the negative 0.41 is good. Well, let's reduce the amount of our fund balance, that actually reduce that appropriated fund balance, which you had that question on, which in the old days, that's exactly what we would have done. When that was zero, and instead of being $1.15 million in the appropriated fund balance, we might bring it down to $1 million and save the money that way. But we can't do that anymore. That's not a permissible item.
So-
Though this would have been a perfect time to do it.
So the tax rates go down.
Yeah, so in this case, tax rates go down. A lot more, like I say, just the overall assessments went up very large, 1.43%, that's a huge number. That shows a lot of growth in the
That's good.
district. So some of those numbers, of that tax growth number, I think finally caught up and finally got it in there, because there was always that question. Just never comes out exactly where you want it to. This actually worked out perfect as far as assessments and that, so.
All right, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Diane Lyons.
Okay.
Laura Schultz.
Yay.
Steve Jenkins.
Yay.
Mark Fleischner.
Yay.
Diego Devitt.
Yay.
Okay, it's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the preliminary Smart Schools Investment Plan, Phase 1, as presented?
So moved. Second.
Okay, all those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve additional 2016-17 fall coaching staff for the 2016-17 school year? Golf varsity assistant Tony Rinaldi, volunteer. Soccer girls modified Dan Lavazzo, $2,308. Volleyball JV Chelsea Leahy, $2,567, and modified to be determined $2,308.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? I'd just like to thank Mr. Rinaldi for volunteering his time to help coach the golf team. And all those in favor? Lost my train of thought. Okay, that's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of Geraldine Ely as long-term substitute in the position of instrumental music teacher at the Rhinebeck High School, Bulkley Middle School, effective September 6, 2016 through December 23, 2016, at the pleasure of the board, at the salary of Step 1 MA plus 8, $59,130 prorated in accordance with the RTA salary schedule for 2016-17. This appointment is to fill the vacancy created by the extension of the leave of absence granted to Laura Natalie, instrumental music teacher at the Rhinebeck High School, Bulkley Middle School.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Just have a question.
Go ahead.
Is this correctly written as instrumental music teacher? Isn't this position also sixth grade chorus?
Yes, but I mean,
That way, is it?
yeah, it is. It's the same assignment that she's had for years, but it's
Just make sure
80%,
instrumental.
it's 80%, and she's a certified instrumental music teacher.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. There's going to be a slight change in the wording of the next motion. I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the 4-year probationary appointment of Charles Johnson to the 1.0 FTE position of technology teacher assigned to the Bulkley Middle School and the Rhinebeck High School on or around September 9th, 2016 in the Industrial Arts General Tenure Area at a salary of Step 1 MA $58,482 in accordance with the RTA salary schedule for 2016-17.
So moved.
Second?
Joe, you just want to explain the reason for the change?
Yeah, and this is, it's really the change from the September 1st, 2016. This gentleman, if appointed by you tonight, is going to have to give 30 days' notice. That's going to bring him into the beginning of September, so we're going to have to arrange for a per diem substitute to take the first several days of the class, but, we're talking about kids returning on the 7th, and he's thinking he's going to be able to be here that next week. So we just need to build a little bit of flexibility into the motion, so there's not an issue with our business office paying him when he starts. So again, if he was somebody who's going to be able to start on day one, we'd do it September 1st, but since we're not exactly sure when he's going to be able to be here, we need a little bit of flexibility in the wording. That's all.
Okay, any questions on that? All right, all those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve additional summer 2016 program and curriculum work.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion, Laura?
Question, based on the change that we just made in 6.8, how or when will this curriculum work be done?
Immediately.
Oh, it can be? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Because, you're approving those two people, neither of whom are currently school district employees, but you're approving them to do the curriculum work. Brian is no longer an employee of the district either, but he's going to come back for that, and we've already set it up with them. So, yeah, they're going to start. Brian was not available, it's not even this week, but he's planning on coming in the following week, and Mr. Johnson can do the same, so.
Okay, all those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve non-unit salaries for 2016-17.
So moved.
Can I move to table this item until
Yes, is
discussion
there
in
a second
executive session?
in favor of tabling?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of tabling this motion? That's unanimous, the motion is tabled. And may I have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussion of employment history of particular persons?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes, we're moving into executive session.